Okay, so we're back. Lesson 3, ammunition. Now, once again, gun safety 101. We're going to go over the 4 cardinal gun rules. And now, if you listen to the other 2, you might find out that I'm going to say this slightly different the 3rd time. But that's because this is live and this is me, so you get what you get. Cardinal rule number 1. All guns are always loaded and we always pretend they are. Whenever you're handling a handgun, consider it loaded, because rule number 1 says that it is. Rule number 2, do not point the muzzle at anything you do not want to destroy. For the new people in the group, this is the muzzle of the gun, the end of the barrel where the bullet comes out. Rule number 3, do not put your finger on the trigger until you intend to fire the gun. This is the condition of your trigger finger 98 to 99% of the time you have a gun in your hand. The amount of time you have your finger on the trigger is a really brief moment in history and time. You pull the trigger, it comes off. Whether you pull the trigger 15 times, that could take 7 seconds. How much time have you had a gun in your hand? More than 7 seconds. Even on the range with live fire, your finger is here. Practice here always. This is the biggest safety that we all have, is our trigger finger. And number 4, know your target, what's beyond your target, what's on the right, the left, what's in front of it. You must positively identify a target and isolate that target if you want to shoot at it, be that paper or another human being. But understand that you're responsible for the terminal resting place of every round you fire. So you want to make sure that if you do miss your target, that resting place of that round is in a safe place. So all guns are loaded. Don't point the muzzle at anything you don't want to destroy. Keep your finger off the trigger and know your target and what's beyond. Now we're going to talk about ammunition. Cartridges, modern cartridges. Please don't call these bullets. Bullets are 1/4 of a modern cartridge, but the whole cartridge itself is called a cartridge. It consists of a projectile, aka a bullet, a brass case with an open end, a powder charge inside that brass case, and a primer to ignite the main powder charge. That's it, 4 things: a bullet, brass, powder, and a primer. And that is a modern cartridge. Now, there are generally just 2 types of cartridges for the modern firearm. There's rim-fired ammunition and there's center-fired ammunition. Rim-fired 22, some 25s are rim-fire, but mostly 22 caliber guns are going to be rim-fire, which means that the firing pin can strike anywhere on that 360-degree circumference of that piece of brass. It does not have to hit in a specific spot. Center-fire cartridges, which is much more common in handguns, the firing pin does in fact have to hit the center of the cartridge in order for the gun to go bang. So, as I said just a moment ago, but we'll go over it just a little bit here. When you pull the trigger, the firing pin hits the primer, and there's a little bit of priming compound in there. It gets crushed. A tiny little spark is ignited. It jumps through the backside of the case, lights the powder charge on fire. A huge volume of hot, high-pressure gas is then generated inside that piece of brass. Because the brass is open and the barrel on the gun is open, the bullet exits the brass, goes down through the bore, exits the muzzle at a high speed. The bang and the flash and the smoke all comes after the bullet has left the muzzle. Pretty simple. There's no explosions. There's no real technical anything. It's just a lot of gas. So handguns is all about gas, or at least the discharge of the firearm is about gas. Now, what you're going to want to make sure is that you use the proper cartridge in your gun. So on your gun, somewhere is going to be a caliber stamp. On this particular 1911, it says 45 auto. 45 auto, 45 ACP are the same thing, because ACP means automatic Colt pistol. 45 auto is an abbreviation of the abbreviation. So they can make it even shorter just by calling it a 45A, but they don't. But somewhere on that gun is going to be a caliber stamp. As I spoke earlier, I have a gun up here, the Beretta 86. It's chambered in 9 short, which is also 380 ACP. So they could be on the frame, they could be on the slide, they could be on the trigger guard. The caliber is going to be on that gun somewhere. And when you pick up a box of ammo, on the end stamp of the box, you're going to have the information that you need. This one, particular one, says 45 auto, 230 grain full metal jacket. But make sure that what you're putting in your gun is what it wants to be fed. So make sure you're putting the proper caliber ammunition into your gun. Now there are plus P cartridges, which most self-defense rounds will come in a plus P condition, or a plus P plus. Plus P simply means plus power. Plus P plus means plus power, plus more power. Some guns cannot handle plus P ammunition. Make sure that if you're going to put plus P in your gun, that it can handle it, because when that gas is built up, earlier I spoke to you about the fact that the brass expands inside the chamber. You want a chamber that can handle the pressures that are involved with plus P ammo. Some guns say plus P on them. This gun did not. I called the manufacturer to ensure that I could run plus P ammo through this as self-defense ammo, and they assured me that that gun could handle the plus P pressures. So if you don't know, simply call the manufacturer. Now we're going to have a bunch of different types of bullets and configurations. Understand real simple that jacketed metal jackets, full metal jackets, are practice rounds. You do not want to use a full metal jacket in self-defense. It is strictly a practice round. We'll talk about why that in just a little bit. But here are 3 jacketed rounds that have been, well, 2 of them have been fired and this one has not. They've been recovered from the dirt mound. If you look at these closely, there's etching from the rifling on this brass. These are practice rounds because this is what they look like when they leave the muzzle, and it's pretty much what they look like after they get dug out of a dirt mound. Self-defense rounds are considerably different. These are jacketed hollow points. These have not been fired because they look a whole lot different when they're recovered. These are jacketed hollow points. These are self-defense rounds. In one of the other sections I talked to you about expenses. So if a box 50 of these costs $20 of practice rounds, a box of 20 of the same caliber in a self-defense round is going to cost you more than $20, probably going to cost you close to $40 for that same box, but it's got a very special round in it. You only get 20 of them. So when you do get a gun and you choose a particular self-defense ammunition, you're going to have to cycle it through the gun to make sure that your gun is actually feeding that ammunition. The first round goes bang, the second round should cycle into the gun and go bang again. Pretty much all you need, but you also want to make sure that your rounds are hitting where you want them to hit. So these rounds have not been fired. This is a expansion round. These 3 rounds are fragmentation rounds. They act differently than the expansion rounds, but they're also self-defense rounds. So when these rounds are fired, these 2 jacketed hollow points, this is the end result of the bullet. It mushrooms, it expands, it's designed to do mass quantities of soft tissue damage inside the human body, and more importantly, it's also designed not to go through the human body. If it does, it will just pass harmlessly outside the person's body and fall to the ground because the energy has been spent expanding and pushing through the human body. Whereas this round right here, if you don't hit any bone or you don't hit anything solid, it's just going to punch right through that person. And if there's somebody standing behind them because you broke rule number 4 and you didn't know it was behind your target, this round's going to hit the person standing behind them. They're called through and throughs, or getting hit by a through and through. You don't want that to happen. So you want to use quality self-defense ammunition, either mushrooming rounds that cause this or fragmentation rounds. That's what's left of that round, just the base of it. The rest of it was shredded, and it goes in 8 or 9 different directions through the human body. And with this round, there's only 2 trocars that I could find left, but all 8 of these trocars get torn off of the base and go in 8 different directions in the human body. So these do a lot of damage, but they don't do the same shockwave damage. The wound cavity on these is pretty substantial. Personally, I wouldn't want to be hit by anything, even a full metal jacket, but the wound cavity on a jacketed hollow point expansion round is going to be bigger, but this causes a great deal of secondary damage as well. So you have to decide what you're going to put into your gun and what your gun wants to cycle. So important note to remember: full metal jackets or any type of lead ball rounds are for practice. Jacketed hollow points or hollow points for fragmentation are what you want to use. Now they do make a frangible round. I don't have any frangible rounds, and you really can't recover a frangible round because frangible rounds are used for close quarter steel practice, and they're designed to just go on contact with the steel. So there's no ricochets and nobody gets hurt when you're practicing close quarter steel practice. So That's not a self-defense round either. A frangible round is a practice round. Let's talk about a cartridge malfunction. There's a thing called a hang fire, which is extremely rare. A hang fire is a perceptible or temporary delay in the ignition of a cartridge after the primer has been struck by the firing pin. In other words, has everybody in this audience seen a firecracker be lit, thrown on the ground, and you all watch the fuse go out, and then 10 seconds later the firecracker goes off anyways? That's basically the same thing as a hang fire in ammunition. It's just a super delayed reaction. I have never personally had a hang fire, and I have never met anybody that had a personal hang fire. I did meet one individual that saw a hang fire that did not come out of his gun. The gun was laid on the table. The person did not clear the gun properly. 30 seconds later, the round discharged when nobody was touching the gun. That's a hang fire. They're extremely rare. Most hang fires become misfires, or duds, as one might say. But then we have squib loads. Squib loads are real. Squib loads do happen in all caliber guns. They happen in all types of cartridges, be they rimfire or centerfire. A squib load is a noticeable development of less than pressure, normal pressure, or velocity after the ignition of the round. So if you're firing a gun that's going bang, 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 that is a squib load. Did the round clear the muzzle? You need to make sure that you have smoke coming out the end of your gun, or a new hole in your target. If you can identify either one of those, there's a really, really, really good chance that the bullet did exit the muzzle. If you cannot do that, you must immediately stop, completely unload your gun, do whatever you need to do to ensure that the barrel is not obstructed by a bullet. Because if you put a round down the barrel of a gun that already has a bullet stuck in it, you create a little mini pipe bomb. And bad stuff can happen with a pipe bomb in your own hands. A friend of mine gave me this shotgun. This barrel used to be about that long, and the stock was intact, and it actually worked. Until a friend of his pulled the trigger on a shotgun shell with an obstructed barrel and blew the end of the barrel off, blew a chunk of the stock off, and completely destroyed the inner workings of the gun. From what I understand, he was not injured in this, but pretty well shaken up. So this is what a squib load can do to a gun. It can shred them if you've got an obstructed barrel. Don't do that. So again, if you hear or feel a noticeable difference in that round, stop. Remember I told you earlier that when you fire a gun, the smoke and the bang come out after the bullet. So if you've got smoke coming out the end of your muzzle, really, really good chance that your bullet left the muzzle. Or if you can simply identify a new hole in the target, you can then proceed. But if you can't identify those confidently, we're talking about handguns here, people. If you cannot do this confidently, unload the gun, check it to make sure that it does not have an obstructed barrel. The end of the barrel could blow up on the next round. It could come apart at your hand. It could shred the whole firing chamber of it. So be real, real careful. Make sure that you do not have an obstructed barrel. Now we're going to store ammunition. It should be stored in a cool area. Ammunition should be stored away from firearms in a separate area. We'll talk more about that later, but if you're storing a firearm for ready access versus storage, we'll talk. Ammunition should be stored in a place where children and other unauthorized persons will not have access to it. Ammunition should not be exposed to water or solvents such as petroleum-based products, bore cleaner, ammonia, or other chemicals. These chemicals cause the primer powder charge to deteriorate, resulting in a cartridge malfunction. Now, when we're talking about storage, storing brass versus storing nickel-coated, most self-defense rounds, or good quality ones, are going to come in a nickel-coated condition, which just doesn't corrode. It's extremely slippery, but that's perfectly okay. But it will not corrode like a piece of brass will. The brass will get some natural products on it, some fuzz and whatnot, and it won't fit into the chamber eventually. I have had rounds that were so ugly that even in the 357 revolver, I could not put the rounds into the chamber until I cleaned them. So try to keep your ammunition in a place that doesn't get hot and cold and hot and cold and hot and cold, because it will sweat and it will corrode. And that's pretty much with brass. Nickel does not corrode. Now we're going to talk about the different types of cartridges that we have. You could actually have just simple lead rounds. I made these so I know they're lead and I know how much they weigh, but they're just a 45 caliber, a 357, a 9mm, and a 40 caliber round. They're shaped differently because they're different calibers and they have got to have a weight determined for them. Like these 3 rounds right here are all 45 caliber rounds. They look very different because a bullet has to maintain the diameter measurement for the caliber that is being used for. So the only way to gain weight or lose weight for a particular caliber round is to change the shape of the bullet after it leaves the case. So these are called truncated cones, those two, and this is a round nose, but they're all 45 caliber rounds. This one weighs 150 grains, this one is 180 grains, and this one weighs 230 grains. Some things are close, like the one on my left is a 357 Magnum, the one on my right is a 38 Special. 38 Special and the 357 are the same exact diameter. So you can take a 38 Special and chamber it into a 357 because the chambers on the 357 are longer than the 38 Special, but you cannot chamber a 357 into a 38 Special because the chambers are not long enough to receive the extra length of the brass. And those are relatively easy to tell the difference, but here's the difference without a bullet in it. So the difference is pretty noticeable on the brass without a bullet in it. This one can get strange if you're not careful. That one of those is a 9mm, the other one is a 380. I loaded these like this on purpose to show you that there could be potential confusion on loading or handling and shooting a 9mm versus a 380. The 380 is a smaller, considered a smaller caliber, even though it's the same exact diameter, very similar to the 357 and 38 Special. But you cannot take a 380 and put it into a 9mm and have it fire and cycle, because even though the 380 will fit into the 9mm chamber, there's not enough energy to cycle the heavier slide of the 9mm guns. So even though it will fit, you're only going to be a one-shot wonder if you do that. And like the 357 38 Special, the 9mm brass is too long to chamber into a 380. And here's the difference between the 9mm on my left and 380 on my right. You'll notice that there's a difference, not near as much noticeable as a 357 versus 38, but noticeable. Here's a side note, y'all, a side note for everybody that ever had a question as to whether or not they have revolver ammo in their hand or pistol ammo in their hand. Revolver ammo, the case head is bigger than the body of the brass itself. So if you roll it away from you, it'll roll on a radius away from you. Pistol ammo, the head of the case is the same diameter as the case itself, so they roll straight away. Get back here. They roll straight. Get back here. It's not rolling very good. I need to. There you go. Rolling straight away for the most part. Let's try the 9mm. Rolls even straighter. So if you're ever wondering whether you have revolver ammo in your hand or pistol ammo in your hand, just drop it on the table and roll it. And if it rolls on a quick arc radius away from you, it's definitely for a revolver. If it rolls straight, it's for a pistol. Now, the head stamps on these have information that you're going to want to know to help you if you've got rounds that are very similar, to tell you what you have in your hand. This one says 9mm, it could say 9mm Luger, it could say 9 Luger, and this one says 380 Auto, could be 380 ACP. But what's on the head stamp is the caliber of the round you have in your hand. Same thing holds true for for revolver rounds. The head stamp has information that is sometimes critical to know what you have in your hand. Here is 40 caliber brass and nickel. Chances are this came out of a self-defense round that I picked up off the ground, and that was a practice round. We spoke earlier about the expansion. I'm going to bring this guy out again. When these rounds are fired, the pressures inside the case expand so much that they take the entire outside of the case and push it up against the inside edge of the chamber, and expansion is pretty severe in some cases, and that's why your ammunition needs to be clean. So if you've got dirty ammo and it actually fits into the chamber, you might have a really hard time getting it out after it's been fired because of the expansion of the brass inside the chamber. Now here are a couple of, this is a big dog. This is a 44 Magnum. This is a 45 auto. Pretty big difference. This is a concealable or carry a gun. I believe Ruger makes the 44 Magnum Alaska. There is a caliber in between that, which is 41 Magnum. There might be a couple of others. There's some Wildcat cartridges that people make, but I'm just going to run back down through the common cartridges. So we got 44 Magnum, 45 Auto, 40 Smith & Wesson. Now, it's called the Smith & Wesson, 40 Smith & Wesson. And then we have 357 Magnum, 38 Special, 9mm, 380. Over here we got the little guys, the mouse calibers. This is a 22 Magnum, and this is a 22 long rifle. They do make a 22 short, and in between these two is a 25 auto and a 32 auto, which I do not have any of those. But if you take the 32 auto, the 25 auto, this one can maybe go over there sometimes in the self-defense world, because the 22 Magnum, you can see the difference. It's almost twice as long. There's a lot of power in the 22 Magnum. So we're going to take this guy and we're going to put it over here for self-defense. It doesn't matter statistically, unless you're in a region of the country where people have 9 layers of clothes on for winter. It doesn't matter statistically what you shoot somebody with. If you put 2 to 3 rounds of any of these into that 8-inch pie plate, the upper high torso, with any of these calibers, the result's going to be the same. They will stop messing with you. The end result of that doesn't really matter. Your concern is to make them stop their bad behavior. So if you can handle a large caliber, great. If you can't, great. Just get a gun that fits you ergonomically, that you can use and operate the mechanisms on it, whether it's a pistol or a revolver. And just don't worry too much about caliber right now. Eventually, if you practice, you will be able to shoot guns of considerably different sizes. This is a horrible gun to learn with. Horrible because it's so small, not because it's a horrible gun, but because it's just so small. It doesn't fit anybody's hands. This is kind of not a great gun to learn with because it's so big. So if you can find something in between those two, such as, this size gun, or a striker fire in that size, or a striker fire in this size, they're all relatively the same size when it comes to 9mm guns. Get in there. Alright, you've heard the myth of knockdown power. What happens when you shoot somebody with a gun? You've seen Hollywood movies where people are thrown backwards when they get shot. That's typically not going to be the case, especially if you are shooting at an assailant or a person that's running at you. If I were to shoot a 200-pound man with a 230 grain 45 caliber bullet, and that person's running 7 to 10 miles an hour, when this round hits him, the mass of the body that's traveling is 8,000 times the size of this bullet. The body's not going to stop. It's going to continue to come on. Physics just proves it's going to happen. So don't expect somebody to just instantly fall down like they do in the movies. They could be deceased at that point, but inertia, momentum, everything's going to keep that body coming forward. And if they have a knife and they're trying to stab you, they could be right on top of you by the time they stop moving. And there is a thing called dead man shooting, where the human body can cognitively function 5 to 7 seconds after it's clinically dead. The brain still has enough energy and enough firepower to produce movements, even though 5 to 7 seconds later it's endgame for that particular individual. So understand that just shooting somebody that's running at you is not necessarily going to stop them. Chances are it's not going to stop them, not even slow them down. So make room, just make space. Run that way, run that way, run that way. Just get out of the way. Space is always your friend. Always, always, always. I know that's a little self-defense-y for the Gun Safety 101, but eventually I would imagine that some of you might want to carry a gun for self-defense. And again, in your state, whether it's a concealed carry permit required, or you're in a constitutional state, which, by the way, currently half of the states in this country have constitutional carry, which means the people in that state do not have to have any type of permit to carry a gun concealed on their person, or open in that case. But still, get training. If you live in a constitutional carry state, get training. Training like this, training at the range, find somebody local to do it with. These are guns. And used improperly, people can get hurt. So we want to train, 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 train. We want to train smart. We want to train hard. We want to train a lot.